Hi, Sally. Thanks so much for joining us today for The-InnerPreneur. So, what can you tell us about Tuesday's Children?
Hi, Whitney. Thank you for having me. Tuesday's Children was founded in the aftermath of Tuesday, September 11th. We were initially founded to support the 3,051 children who lost a parent in that tragedy. And since then, we also expanded our programming. We obviously support all of the families who have lost loved ones, not just parents. But we also support first responders, rescue and recovery workers who worked at Ground Zero and helped in the aftermath. I'm not sure if you know, but the site was burning for about 3 months. So there are a lot of rescue and recovery workers who have life-threatening illnesses, cancer related to that exposure to the dust cloud. And a
And
lot of
respiratory problems, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a lot of respiratory problems. So we have about 6,000 of their family members in our database, and so many survivors and rescue and recovery workers have now died of those 9/11 related illnesses. More people have died from those illnesses than died on September 11th. So that was one of the ripple effects that we worked to address. We also created an international program that was really started by ideas from our 9/11 youth. In 2008, we created Project Common Bond, which so far has brought together more than 1,000 teenagers from 35 countries for a week-long symposium we do in the summer, focused around peace building and friendships, and a winter session that we do every January. So that's been a wonderful program. And then in recent years, unfortunately, another ripple effect of September 11th really is the large number of military service members in the US who've lost a family member. There have been over 7,000 who have died in combat in the war on terror, but there are actually 4 times as many who have died by suicide. So there are more than 37,000 families in the US who've now lost a service member. So we work with that population. We did feasibility studies to see how our long-term healing programs translate to that population and meet gaps in services. So we work with them. And then we were getting an increasing number of inquiries over the years from communities impacted by similar tragedies, both in the US and internationally. So about 10 years in, we started codifying our programming and our adaptive approach to programming into our long-term healing model, which we now share with other communities. We do a lot of community resilience work with service providers in communities impacted by mass shootings, by domestic terrorism, and then we work with chaperones in our 35 Project Common Bond partner countries to really share perspectives on long-term healing and on supporting communities through the aftermath of that. We kind of help them chart their roadmap to long-term healing and think through what are some of the more immediate needs versus what's some of the long-term planning and sustainability that has to be put in place to have a framework of support. First and foremost, I would say our approach focuses around building trust and building community. And the most effective program is really something that's a common thread throughout all our programming, but peer support. One of our longest running programs is youth mentoring, and that really provides just an additional person for somebody who's lost a parent or sibling, who's a child to talk to as they go through different developmental stages. And we provide specific, trauma and grief training to our mentors so that they're able to really reflect on things in appropriate ways and deal with trauma and grief reactions with kids as they arise. We also provide peer support for adults through programs like Creative Insight. We have a career resource center as well that kind of guides youth as well as surviving parents and other family members into charting their new career and kind of thinking, where do they go next after trauma and grief?
So let's talk about the Creative Insight program. That's how we originally connected.
Yeah.
And so what can you tell me about the Creative Insight?
So this program was actually brought to us by a 9/11 family member, a surviving spouse, who was introduced to the program, Creativity in Business, and wanted to adapt it into a trauma-informed program for our families. It was you probably know the history of Creative Insight, that it was created at Stanford University. It was a school of business course called Creativity in Business, and was really almost like a career coaching program. Our families were experiencing, a need to kind of rethink their lives and reimagine their futures, after those first few years of the trauma and grief, and think, what do I do next? So this family member brought it to us. Yeah, and they've been great. They've trained a lot of our family members as peer facilitators over the years as well. And they've facilitated a lot of our courses. I know you're a trained creative insight facilitator, so I don't have to tell you all of the nuances of the program, but for those who are listening, it really helps people utilize their creative potential, think through problem solving, trust their intuition. And for a lot of our families, it also helps them have more self-confidence and think about self-care and self-compassion, things that they may have not made time for, or even thought that they could carve out time for as surviving parents, raising kids, and just kind of juggling everything they were juggling.
And also that resiliency to know that if plan A doesn't work, there is a process model that one can follow to then take those next steps to get back on track. And that that there are other ways, and using those self-care tools as well, with the meditation, the journaling, and the mindfulness techniques.
Yeah, and I love that creative insight, oftentimes we've used the hero's journey as kind of the trajectory to think through how people are, going through their lives. And that does relate very closely to the trauma that they experienced and the grief that they experienced, in kind of having to rethink that and do plan B, and kind of figure out, okay, what is next? I had intended for my future to be with this person in it. And, a lot of our surviving family members had retirement plans and, their whole life set out ahead of them. And then it does get disrupted. So it's a transformation when a trauma happens, when a tragedy happens, when grief happens. But we work with them through creative insight to think about how it can be a positive transformation.
And do you have any standout success stories of any of the people who've gone through the creative insight that you can think of where they have been able to turn these horrific tragedies into something more positive?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a bunch of testimonials from it, but I think that the number one success story is the large number of families who've come back to us and said, I want to become a facilitator and be able to give this back to other families. A lot of them have said they just had increases in self-confidence. I know our pre and post surveys have really shown that it's been, a 20% increase in time that they now spend on self-care or in feeling more self-confident. So there's a huge shift that we've seen, just in even being able to feel like they can effectively manage their own stress and kind of be more social and, do those day-to-day things, carving out that time. But yeah, I think a lot of them have really felt empowered to make a career change. Some of them have started their own businesses, become entrepreneurs, from going through this program, really having the confidence then to take the dream that they were thinking about and kind of plant that seed and bring it to fruition.
And do you personally feel that that is because they've been through a trauma where they see that life is so fragile, so they feel like they have the confidence to then take the leap in the limited time that we may have here?
Certainly people have expressed that life is fragile and why not take that leap. But in a lot of cases, what's really heartwarming about it is that some of them have done it building on legacy and really feeling like it's a way that they can continue to honor their loved one and their experience and their own personal strength in overcoming what they overcame. So I do think it's very linked to that program. As you know, it's just a wonderful program that really empowers a lot of people and helps them look at the trajectory of kind of what happened to them and how far they've come. In the pre and post surveys, it also showed that, people felt that they just didn't have the energy to do this. And then after the program, they really felt driven, like their energy level was higher and they felt motivated to kind of make those changes and focus on themselves. So I think and just an overall life outlook has been more positive since going through the program. And then, this isn't really captured in the surveys, but I think what's beautiful about it too is that so many of the family members that have taken part in this program have kept in touch with each other and with their particular cohort who went through the program together.
I've seen that in the courses that I've taught, that people who didn't know each other, had absolutely nothing in common, and may have lived in different countries, in fact, have become like fast best friends. And, because in the program we have that peer coaching component where each week you have a peer partner and you take turns doing the exercises and learn to coach somebody else, but ultimately you're learning to self-coach so that you are building those tools into your repertoire of your little self-care toolkit. And out of that, some people who were, let's say it was supposed to be a 20-minute call minimum, were on the phone for hours and hours and have stayed in touch. And some have even gone into business together.
We also did it with Newtown, with some of the community members impacted by the Sandy Hook Elementary School tragedy. And, that one was very successful as well, in that people really just opened up and were able to form bonds. But when we worked with military families of the fallen, when we adapted the program to serve them, that's where we really saw the connections happening across the miles. So we changed the program a little bit to do the first session in person, having surviving family members travel from all different states, but meet in one location, usually at a retreat center. And then the rest of the 6 weeks would be online. So they were still connecting with each other, still having their peer buddy. And then the final week was kind of a reunion session, almost like a big celebration. And so it's great to see those friendships that have blossomed from other sides of the US, people who've really kept in touch and maintained that through the program.
I really love that model. But in the courses that I taught, we do a final project, which is really a celebration of what everybody kind of learns through the 8-week journey.
So in total, over 800 have gone through Creative Insight through Tuesday's Children.
Now, are there any secondary programs available for those who've gone through the Creative Insight Journey program with Tuesday Children?
Yeah, we actually, one of the things we know at Tuesday's Children, we call it our long-term healing model, because we know that when families go through grief, families go through trauma, families go through tragedy, it doesn't just go away. It's something that becomes a live with. And I think in Creative Insight, we've often talked about the live withs and how to, kind of shape your future around them and embrace them rather than discarding them or being frustrated by them. But we have been offering peer support programs now for our 9/11 population that we just introduced after the 20th anniversary, because there was an increased need for that. So we know that certain life milestones really feed the need for programs and connection like that. And a lot of the family members that wanted to have that were families that went through Creative Insight.
It serves almost as a trigger. And to have that additional layer of support is fantastic. Yeah,
it is a trigger. I mean, milestones in life are really activating. And that's one thing we see every time, we go through an anniversary of the 9/11 tragedy, but also as, our military families go through different milestones with, the birthday of their lost loved one, or with, the anniversary of their death. Or even, just changes in life. You move to a new home, or you go through a 16th birthday, or you retire, or you kind of go through another milestone that you thought you would go through with that loved one. It does make you rethink it. We've even had family members reflect on, okay, I've now been alive. I've now been without this person for longer than we were together. And that's a milestone in and of itself, and another kind of realization. So all of those things reactivate trauma and grief. And I think the connection that our programs offer, we do a lot of family engagement events for all our families across our populations, just bringing them together for that organic peer support, sometimes in partnership with sports franchises to go to baseball games. Sometimes we have picnics, sometimes we have, boat rides, all kinds of things, but really just letting them be together and support each other.
So how is Tuesday's Children? There's a lot of fantastic, charities and NGOs out there. Tell me what makes Tuesday's Children unique, and how are you funded?
So that's a two-pronged question. I would say what makes us unique is really that we provide long-term support. So a lot of the organizations out there that support families across, the populations that we serve, the 9/11 population. There were a lot of nonprofits that were founded after 9/11, over 350. But Tuesday's Children remains really because we have dedicated support from a lot of our partners, but also because we've built the strong community that we've built. Our families know that they can rely on us as they go through those different milestones when they need us. They may be doing great and want to attend family engagement events and be involved in the community, and they may have a setback and want to access additional resources through us. And they know that we have that adaptive approach and that range of programs that can support those varied needs. And likewise, they have been the driving force behind wanting to embrace other communities that have similar losses and similar grief. So I think that's really been the driving force behind our growth. And a perfect example of that is, we have a family advisory board that we rely on for feedback on what programs are needed. But we also have a junior board that is comprised of a lot of 9/11 children who are now young adults in their 20s, 30s, entrepreneurs themselves with, strong careers. They want to give back to Tuesday's Children because they have experienced post-traumatic growth and, gotten so much through our programs. A lot of them have now become mentors to military families who've lost a parent. So it really kind of goes full circle. Some of them are now parents themselves and are facing new needs and new reminders because of that. So I think that's where our longevity stands. And that's what makes us unique, in that we really provide that connection across those populations and offer that peer support. And then in terms of funding, it's really a mix. Initially we were founded by family and friends of those impacted on September 11th. And we quickly had to kind of diversify in order to stay sustainable. So, we had a lot of Wall Street organizations funding us, companies that were impacted on September 11th. And we still do have some of those as partners. We got a lot of foundation funding as well. And then we were able to get some federal grants to support some of our expansion programming. We currently have some funding from the Department of Homeland Security to really address, mass violence in the US and help in prevention efforts and elevate the survivor stories of the population we work with to really tell that story and try and prevent future tragedies from happening.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that last aspect in terms of preventing future incidents from happening.
Sure. I mean, we're not from the law enforcement side in terms of prevention, but we work with across our population so many survivor voices. And we really believe in their lived experience as the expertise. So we host an annual forum. We host quarterly speaker series events. And the purpose of those is really to have panels of survivors that are on the same level as the community resilience experts, the trauma and grief experts, the prevention experts, because the people who have been through these tragedies are really the ones who can say the most about how they've been impacted and how they can be helped. So that's where we really try and focus our prevention efforts.
It's so interesting because I just recently reconnected with an old friend who was involved with the production of a film called Code Red, Youth of the Nation, which was about the Parkland community tragedy. Yeah.
Our generation's greatest fear is not coming home safe.
I wish we could sit here and part ways knowing that this is never going to happen again.
There's a shooter at the school.
And that there's not other families out there that are going to be affected by something this tragic.
I immediately jumped up and I yelled, my son's in the building.
But that's dreamland. That's not reality.
This has to end.
What could be more important than protecting our kids?
Who are we?
We
are the youth of the nation.
We are the youth of the nation.
Are the youth of the nation.
And we're all in this together.
And we're all in this together.
This
is a national
Code Red.
Code Red.
This is a national Code Red.
We actually have a coalition, because collaboration in this area is so important. We actually have a coalition called the Survivors of Tragedy Outreach Program that is comprised of, multiple communities across the US and internationally. And it's comprised of people from all our populations. So those impacted by terrorism, military conflict, and mass violence. but it's a way to elevate those survivor narratives and really send the message that it is possible to provide support. It's not a political platform at all. It's just a way of bringing awareness to the need for long-term healing and the need for collaboration, and to kind of listen to those survivor voices. Because I think we, especially in the US with the large volume of tragedies happening, we just had a record number of mass shootings over July 4th weekend.
It's astounding to me. It's horrific.
It is, yeah. But it's important, to focus. People lose sight. They've become so desensitized that they lose sight of the need for long-term support for the communities that have been impacted by that. They kind of move on to the next thing after the headlines. And, these tragedies, we know firsthand, have ripple effects that last a lifetime.
So for anybody out there in our audience who's listening, who either is interested in learning about Tuesday's Children or knows of somebody who maybe has been through a trauma or a crisis, what resources and how would they find out about your programming?
Our website is a great place to start. We are at TuesdaysChildren, all one word, .org. And we have some resources on there if you visit our community resilience page. If people are experiencing a trauma or grief, and especially if they have children, we have tip sheets on coping with tragedies for children and adults. And we have a very helpful tip sheet on trauma and grief reactions by ages and stages, which that's one I share most often with people, because they really might not be thinking about the way a 5-year-old reacts to grief versus the way a teenager reacts to grief, and ways to, accommodate those needs appropriately.
That sounds really smart. And you mentioned international. So what is Tuesday's Children doing internationally?
Sure. So our program, Project Common Bond, has, as I said, had over 1,000 youth from 35 countries.
May we be the heroes of our story. Doubt, fear, anger, tears, grief and pain are inevitable. The stronger the emotions, the stronger the love. And that's where our stories start, with the love we had for someone close. May we cherish the memories, live and honor that love still growing in our hearts.
Project Common Bond provides the opportunity for young adults from all over the globe to come together, to heal, to learn from each other, and most importantly, to become peace builders. These young adults are taking what they learned and making a positive impact in their communities. These are the peace ambassadors of the future.
My father passed away in the Navy.
My dad died in Iraq.
Because I lost my little brother in the shooting.
I lost my father in 2005 and he died in Iraq.
My mom died in the 2017 Barcelona attacks.
My father, Joseph J. Plessier Jr., was killed in the Pentagon in the September 11th attacks.
I lost my brother, my cousin, and my brother-in-law.
My dad in 2007, he was in the Marines in Iraq.
I lost my father and he got killed by terrorists.
My father was KIA in Iraq.
Since September 11, 2001, hundreds of thousands of individuals have been killed by global terrorism, military conflict, and mass violence. Many have lost their countries in the process and become refugees.
We need something that's a positive force, and Project Common Bond is able to be that positive force, specifically working with teens and young adults. The future difference makers in the world are here this week.
In the last 2 decades, Tuesday's Children has linked tens of thousands of family members impacted by tragedy to resilience-building programs.
Also, it's a place that lets you coping with your stress, your anxiety.
Sharing your story is something really important.
My company, Teledyne FLIR, we are one of the sponsors of Tuesday's Children, and specifically Project Common Bond. Seeing how that loss transcends language.
The way you say how are you in Urdu is aap kaise ho.
Perfect! Great! They aren't dependent on having to communicate directly with language. They're doing music. They're doing art, they're doing dance. All of these different ways of interpreting emotion and also processing emotion and grief.
We have our web of connection.
Very easy to hold a grudge against certain religions, for example. Having like, oh, I win or you lose. No, we strive to find something where we both win.
Project Common Bond can change not only the person or the participants that's here, can change a whole community.
I think it's important to learn about conflict. That's actually what we're like getting into in our dignity groups.
It's an amazing feeling that you feel someone struggling and you just drew a good road for them.
If we don't help each other, be negative, we can like make a peace, bring a peace to our world.
Maybe if I help you today, you'll help someone else, and that someone else will help me one day.
Like, we are the people. Like in the Declaration of Independence, we are the people, so we all need to be there for each other.
You might be open or you might be open. So just be ready.
There is no us and them. It's just us and us.
I believe that if you help others, you're helping yourself.
I learned that everyone can make a difference, and no matter how big or small it is, it can have an impact on the world.
One thing you can always share between two people, regardless of understanding, is love. And I think it's very important just to hold that close and allow it to keep us unified regardless of conflict.
Amidst the rain, there is a rainbow. Behind the clouds, there is sunshine. Amidst the grief, there is healing. Behind the pain, there is love. Amidst the despair, there is a dream. Behind the victim, there is a survivor. Amidst the fear, there are fighters. Behind the tragedy, there are heroes.
You know, again, those are friendships that last. Our participants come together for a week and then they stay in touch through a closed Facebook group, and, you know, through WhatsApp and through other ways. And we have reunion sessions of that program. So that's really building a community, a new generation of peace builders, really, who have been through tragedy, have seen it firsthand, and are empowered to use their voices and share their experiences to help others. We also have an international program that we just held this year. It was on hiatus for a few years during COVID, but we held it in Washington, D.C. last year, and then in Paris, France, bringing together military surviving spouses from the US, France, and Lebanon. And we would love to be able to incorporate surviving military family members from the UK, from Ukraine. You know, we've talked about that. So yeah, we do that. We also have a very strong volunteer, well, a lot of volunteer initiatives. So we invite people to find out about us and become a youth mentor, become a career mentor. And we have endurance programming. We run a lot of marathons. We're actually opening the London Marathon spots today, I believe. So if anybody wants to run the London Marathon, the spots will be going quickly. And that's a great way to support Tuesday's Children. We do virtual 5Ks as well. If you can't get into an organized race, you can always run on your own and help out our efforts that way.
So for someone who would be interested to become a either a volunteer, a youth volunteer, or mentor, is there virtual training available, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we have two types of mentoring, really. If you want to be a youth mentor, that's a more in-depth relationship with a child who's lost either a parent or sibling in the US military. We do have e-mentoring options available. So if you're not in the US or you're not in that particular child's geographic area, we've got a wait list. So we're really looking for mentors actively. That's more of a commitment. You know, we really expect people to do at least a few hours every month to meet with their mentee. They go through a training, they go through a background check and all of that. And all of that can be done virtually. They meet with our mentoring team before they're matched and paired based on common interests with the participant. Some of our youth mentoring matches have lasted so far with the military program, which has been operating since 2017. Some of those matches are still in place since 2017. And previously with our 9/11 population, we had youth mentoring matches that lasted over a decade. So it's really a long-term friendship and a person that child can rely on. And then our career mentoring matches, we're always looking for people in particular industries. So if you have a dynamic career and you'd love to talk about it with, you know, a teenager, a young adult, or even a surviving family member who's looking to make a career change, we're always happy to make those matches and connect people to their industry.
That sounds amazing. Sally, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for sharing this incredible story about Tuesday Children that definitely deserves more attention. And I can't wait to see what you all are up to next.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you for having us and for raising awareness about Tuesday's Children. And I hope we can work together with you on Creative Insight and some of our other initiatives.
That sounds fantastic. All right. Thank you, Sally. Yes.
Thank you.